Ready? Thank you. Okay. I'm hearing myself real well now. Well, again, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Good. Okay. Thank you all for being here. And if I may, I'd like to begin with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for every opportunity that you afford us to be of service to the public schools of Robeson County, and specifically to the children for which we are bound to help and to learn and to teach. And we pray that you would be with us this morning as we consider matters that are important to that purpose. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. As I review the fall 2022 policy updates, it appears to me that most of the proposed additions are fairly straightforward, and I have marked all of them in my manual, and perhaps you have a system by which you do the same thing. And what I would like to do to facilitate reviewing these and making decisions if we need to make some additions is to go by the proposed updated chart at the beginning of the manual. And of course, as you know, some of them are notated recommended and others required. And all of the proposed additions that I perceived are in red letters. Many of them are editorial changes that relate to particular general statute requirements. Others are particular websites. And there's still others that are, I won't say minor, but are not of major significance in terms of revising the language. What I would like to do before we get into the proposed additions is to reflect on a matter that was brought up at the curriculum meeting. I was not able to be here, but I was viewing online, and the issue came up about grading and the minimum grade that can be given. And to my recollection, and I stand corrected if anybody needs to interject, but I think this matter was covered in a previous meeting. If not, then we can certainly consider it now. And that matter was, that I perceived, was that no grade lower than a 50 on a 6 weeks or 9 weeks grading period. Am I correct in that? Okay. Does anybody have anything to interject or to lay out before us in that vein this time?
Mr. Chair, part of that conversation was in terms of Canvas, homework, and zeros in Canvas. Dr. Carr, can you address that, please?
So when we look at Canvas or any of those places, what happens is if a teacher puts a score in, there's a 0. That's just a regular grade. However, if there's nothing, if there's an assignment in there the teacher has not looked at, it's just going to put a dash. It's not going to calculate into the final grades. So individual grades may show a 0, but the final grade at the end of the semester or 9 weeks cannot be below a 50.
Okay. All right, so that particular policy is already in place. We need to not take any further action at this time. Okay. I think we can facilitate this if we will refer, and if you will sync with me here. The first one that I have marked is Policy Code 2120, Code of Ethics. And the proposed revision here is some addition of language that is stated in red, in particular number 4 at the bottom of page 1 of 3. I won't read that to you, but it does provide some additional clarity about these school board member commitments. Begins with the phrase, "and integrity." And this actually contains not only the letter of that particular edition, but the spirit of it. In that, well, I will state this part of, regardless of whether the policies expressly require compliance by board members. So there are some ethical obligations that board members have to do what is right, whether it's expressly stated in the policy or not. That's the way that I interpret it. Are there any comments on that? If not, then we will.
Mr. Chair, can we back up? Bobby, did we miss school safety policy at first in the book? Let's talk about that because it makes reference to the COVID-19 policies and the change with that.
Sure.
Yes, so the first policy is school safety, and it removes all of our language in relation to COVID, and then just reorders the remaining components of that policy. And that removal is actually they're recommending that, but again, this is something we probably need to take out of our manual.
I was sitting here looking, I was wondering if we had policy concerning drop-off riders, the regulations on maybe around safety. I know I've received several texts this week about parents dropping students off, I think, right around 7:30 or before. And it creating issues because they feel like that there's no staff there for safety measures. Is that something that we might need to consider in this policy if it's not stated? I didn't really see it stated as such, but maybe I overlooked it.
That's something that could be added under supervision of students.
If I'm understanding the question, is morning drop-off that is the concern? And most schools have published their start time, and most schools are accommodating those parents that have to be at work early. So a practice rather than a policy. Bobby, you want to address that? But most schools are accommodating that.
Right, and so all of our schools publish the earliest time that a student can be dropped off. And I would have to get you the exact number of our schools that have before school daycare or before school care as well. We have quite a number of schools that have before school, normally starting around 6:30.
So Bobby, that's being addressed inherently in the way that the scheduling is for the specific schools in terms of supervision of early drop-off.
Yes,
That's being taken care of already by the scheduling.
yes.
And that kind of thing.
Mr. Chair, it sounds like it's covered in the school guidelines other than policy. So at this time, if there's no other questions, I'd like to make a recommendation of accepting school safety policy as written.
Okay, is there a second? Yes, sir.
But I second what Mr. Henry said. Let me make sure, since it's been a while, been in here on one of these. What's in here is or are policies. If I say that, that's correct. And as such, anything that's marked through has been something that the people that look at it for us has taken out. So then we have the option of saying, okay, yes, we're going to go with this, or we're going to add something else later on, or add it a recommendation today. That's the basic way. Okay.
Yes, sir, that's my interpretation.
And I'm just asking that for a question that I'll ask later on. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's been a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, I got a little bit ahead there with the Code of Ethics. We have covered that. And that's a section in and of itself. Are there any comments or suggestions or further revisions? Okay. Yes, sir.
Looks like we have a good comprehensive layout as a policy. No other comments. I make a motion to accept this policy with the changes highlighted in red.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, we'll move on to board member opportunities for development. And again, there is a notation in red, in approximately the middle of the page. Read the Consortium of State School Board Associations. That's in addition to the North Carolina School Boards Association. So that's an insert there to notate the support of opportunities for development for board members. Are there any comments, discussion on that?
Chair, again, it should be noted that North Carolina is no longer affiliated with the National School Board Association, but is now affiliated with the Consortium of State School Boards Association, and that is the major change.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
No further discussion, hearing none. Do I hear a motion that we accept Policy Code 2123? Yes, sir.
Recommendation. At one time, and it was last year, we came as a board and went through some training in here. It was on the curriculum. You all remember that? And I thought it was very, very beneficial. My thing is, I would love to see us come back together and have some training, be it be on one of the math modules, be it one of the reading modules, be it on anything that we deem necessary, if we could do a survey of the board. I thought that it was fruitful for us to come together and do some training in here as a total school board. So that's just an option I'm throwing out of there. When you get to the technology part, and I was reading this yesterday, and it talked about the curriculum committee will decide or will review the technology. We used to have a technology plan, and I do not know what the state requires anymore. I do not know what we require. But it's said in here that we will have a technology plan. In other words, I don't know where that is, what's going on with that. I know that we use technology, by all means we do. But when we get to that part, maybe that's something that the board as a whole could come together, the curriculum committee or anyone, and we could do some kind of training on that or updates or something. So I don't know, that goes back to the last section you just had. It's a thought, and I think that the more we train and the more we get together and we learn what's going on, the depths of it, I think the less the confusion there is out there, that we can talk intelligently to our constituents, well, this is what's going on with that topic. It's just a recommendation. But when you get to the technology part, it talks about the curriculum committee and the technology, their responsibility. And curriculum committee could be the central office curriculum committee. I'm not sure what that's meaning there. That's just a thought that we come together for some specific training as a board like you did with us before.
Thank you, Dr. Manning.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, just as a reminder, with our new school board attorney, part of that contract is that he will provide training for school board, and as administrators are aware, we are in conversation. And so from your recommendation, if we can get board members to provide a list of things that they would like to have training on, we can set that up. But that is part of our attorney contract, provide some of that training. And certainly he could review the technology plan and requirements from the state. But we'll set that up.
I have one follow-up question, and it goes back to the age entry, and it was something mentioned in the first or second part back there, or we hadn't gotten there yet. I'll save it for the age entry. Isn't that in here where the entry of the child, the age entry, isn't in here? And we haven't got to that yet, have we? We just hold off. I'll hold that question to then. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at, I understand we're on policy 2123.
Yes, sir.
Board member opportunities for development.
Yes, sir.
The last major paragraph says unless otherwise approved. That last sentence says if a board member wishes to receive training credit or reimbursed for attending training offered by another entity, he or she must be approved from the board. What board are we talking about?
My interpretation, that it would be the school board itself. Am I correct in that, Bobby?
Shouldn't that also include superintendent?
Yes, and in fact, we do have board members, excuse me, that will be attending the national conference in Florida through the consortium of state school boards that require the signature of the board chair and the superintendent. Yes.
So should we include and superintendent on that line?
I don't know. I think our form covers that.
Okay,
From my standpoint, it's for the reimbursement.
okay.
Right.
Superintendent has to sign.
Right, that's correct.
I make a motion to accept policy 2123 with the highlighted red additions for correction.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Policy 2123 is accepted. We'll move on to policy 3220.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Dr. Carr, can you speak to the district technology plan? And we can provide that for board members.
So right now, we've got a district technology plan, and part of that is including that we increase digital teaching and learning. So how do we help teachers support and implement using technology effectively in the classroom, like the Canvas courses and those types of things, but also how do we use the technology they have more effectively to enhance the instruction? So not just as another projection piece. And so part of it is professional development that is being offered this summer in a variety of different services, but also working with schools face-to-face so that we can help support them in implementing the pieces as far as what does it really mean to do digital teaching and learning in the classroom.
Also, at our last leadership meeting, we had a conversation around the PD needed for digital teaching and learning. From our cognitive survey, realized that that was a area that we needed to improve. And can you talk about that? Because I think you have a plan already in hand, please.
So based on Cogni, it showed that's an area that we are weak in as a district. Working on digital teaching and learning is one area we really need to work on as far as how do we enhance those lessons and how do teachers understand to do it instead of just being a tool. And so part of that is working together with the digital teaching learning, Lisa and Ashley, so that we can really put together a cohesive plan for professional learning for all of our teachers so that they have to use that, but also they are now taking part in all the curriculums that we're using. So part of that is them being involved with ClassWorks, Eureka, Education, and helping how to use that platform more effectively. So they are now part of that digital team to help support those pieces so that we have a clear direction of how do we support teachers with the implementation of those resources. And then also, how do we start really teaching them what does SAMAR and all those other things mean when we talk about integrating technology effectively in the classroom?
That speaks back to Dr. Manuel's and Dr. Williamson's point about additional training workshops so that board members can be up to speed on that inherent application of technology, which is becoming more and more a part of instruction day to day. Yes, ma'am.
Follow-up question, and it may be no longer required, or teachers and administrators now still required to get that 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is per year? Per renewal cycle? Okay, that's a good thing.
Yes, sir.
I noticed too on the bottom, the last paragraph in the first section, the superintendent may establish relationships with businesses and seek grants and other funding sources to acquire additional technology resources. That's great. I like that. I like that change in a manner that the superintendent has authority to, especially with the new CTE program. We can reach out to businesses and include, because they may have some material that may be screened to help our students with CTE.
Thank you, sir. And there's quite a bit of language in red on the page 3220 that addresses technology in the educational program. I'm just focusing on The sentence in the second paragraph, that's the part that's in red, which we've been discussing just in the last few minutes, prepare students to be successful in college careers and globally engaged, productive citizens. I think most of it is self-explanatory. Are there any additional comments, questions? And this particular policy extends to page 2 of 4 and 3 of 4 and 4 of 4. And there's quite a bit of language that is in red, including resources, websites, et cetera, where teachers, administrators, board members, parents, interested citizens can access to get further information and even training. Are there any questions, comments in that particular, from that particular section?
Mr. Gentry, if there's no questions, I make a motion, we accept policy 3220.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes. That policy is accepted. Then we'll move on to policy 3420, student promotion and accountability. There are, as I see, there are only some, I'm not going to call them minor points, but notated in red, General Statute GS 11-115C-407.12 on page 7 of 7. And further red language as defined in policy 4050, children of military families. Yes, sir. Question? Comment?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. I still may be too early, but there was an incident where a child entered school, parents were in the military. Actually, they were living in another country, and they allowed their kids to start public school at age 4.5 or 4. Long story short, the child comes to the United States and enrolls and had already been enrolled in kindergarten and got here and didn't meet the age requirement. I guess my question is that what that means? If a child's already enrolled in school but is underage here, do we go ahead and enroll that child? Is that what that means there?
It may, but the practice normally is if a student moves from another state, excuse me, or even from out of the country and was enrolled in a program, that we do enroll them based on that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That was my understanding as well. Thank you. Yes, sir.
And Dr. Emmanuel, Mr. Gentry, that is addressed in the children of military family, or I'm sorry, 4100. We're getting to that. So
Yes.
that is
Yes.
spelled out in 4100.
I remembered I had seen that in another area, another policy. Are there any further comments, questions on policy 3420?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we'll accept policy change 3420 highlighted in red with the general statutes.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Policy is accepted. We have, if I'm correct, 2 additions today that were before us. Did everyone get those? And so I try to put them in order with as we are proceeding through the policy code numbers. And one is policy code 3450, class rankings. Am I correct, Bobby?
Yes.
Okay. And it simply explains class rankings and the fact that it is one of the method of measuring academic performance. And then it goes into the process of how the ranking will be done at the end of the third 9-week period for students of 11th grade in order to select marshals for the graduation ceremony. And it goes on from there. The process and the requirements, checkpoints.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm questioning to myself, do we even need to put a date in there? Has it been affected?
So, Mr. Chair, so the reason we have added this to our policy committee meeting today, this was approved last year to go into effect this school year, but it has come to our attention that students and parents were not properly informed of this policy change. So when we met yesterday and discussed this, in order to be fair and transparent to those students and parents, we're asking that this policy just be modified to the part, if you'll scroll down a little bit, Cole, that we will implement the new class ranking procedures starting with the 23-24 school year and use our old procedures, which is described, I think, in paragraphs 1 and 2 for
Mr. Bobby, just for clarification, I remember talking about it last year with Jadale and just thinking different things. Now, why did we change from the third 9 weeks to the, because remember we were changing the third 9 weeks to the end of the semester for the grade calculation for ranking?
So, Mr. Chair, so there are several reasons that this policy was placed into effect. One was to be inclusive of all of our students who were going to participate in graduation ceremonies, because if we had a student that decided to graduate in January, previously they would not have been included in ranking and would not have been eligible for all of the cum laudes. So that was one reason. The other primary reason is that in order for ranking to be inclusive of all completed work. So when we look at work when we look at our old method of doing it at the end of the third 9 weeks, we have a situation where students have only completed 50% of the work in a particular course, as opposed to backing it up to the end of the semester where we're assigning a rank or an honor to students who have completed an entire semester of work and not making a judgment or assigning a particular honor to students who are halfway through a course. And also this is also allows us for those college, university, CCP courses that may only assign, that we may or may not get mid-semester, midterm grades for. Again, this is going to be more inclusive and a more equitable policy moving forward.
So in effect, it extends the eligibility period to the end of the fourth 9 weeks.
No, sir, it would back that ranking period up from the end of the third 9 weeks to the end of first semester.
Mr. Chair, may Mr. Bobby make a clear statement as to what is for this school year via marshals and class ranking, quality points, whatever. I know what he's saying. We understand it, but I need him to make a clear statement of what is for the public. I know that we have a couple of parents online waiting for clarification, but when we're explaining it for the educators to understand. I need it for the parents to understand of what is for this school year via marshals, via the entire ranking process. I mean, the units and all that. Just what is this school year? In milkman words.
Before Mr. Bobby says that, let me add to what Dr. Manning says, because folks, every year it seems like we come up March or April, there's questions about how did we rank? And it's too late then really to fix it. So I'm gonna say, reiterating what you said, forget next year. Just let's get something out, what we're gonna do this year, and get that to the high schools as quick as possible, because of exactly what you're saying, because it's happened the last several years on and off, some kind of question about why is my child not a marshal? How was it ranked? When did it start? When did it stop? So I'll be quiet, Mr. Bobby. I'll let you say it where I'll understand it.
You can begin it before this school year.
Yeah.
Deal with the marshals first, and then I think if it's a clear statement, because jumping back and forth, they are confused.
So for this school year, what we are recommending is to return to our previous policy that stated we would rank at the conclusion of the third 9 weeks. So that basically means that any and all classes where students have a grade and at the end of that third 9 weeks, then those courses would be included in the ranking process, regardless if it's regular honors, AP, and or CCP university. So our proposal is for the 22-23 school year that, again, all classes that a student is currently enrolled in for the third 9 weeks would be included as part of the ranking process. Now, the caveat to that is, of course, we have the full power school. And so instead of getting a whole credit when the calculation's done, Power School ends up assigning a half a credit. So there is some manipulation that has to take place prior to, but this does not exclude any class that a student is currently enrolled in. The ranking process is inclusive of all courses.
Bobby, again, clarify, weighted, unweighted, and then who determines that?
Right. So there has been conversation as well, is that we made a policy, or the policy that we adopted last school year removed AP courses as part of the ranking. That is not true. State board policy requires that ranking be done in a weighted fashion. So ranking is completed based on a student's weighted GPA, not unweighted. So the state board policy tells us how. State board policy does not tell us when. So we are following state board policy by including all courses, the weighted GPA.
Clarification, this is, you're speaking also specifically of us identifying marshals, chief marshals, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Yes.
So am I correct in thinking that the fourth 9 weeks does not play a role in the class ranking?
No.
No, it doesn't.
That is not correct. So for class ranking, the way the policy is written, this policy is written for ceremonial purposes only. And that is to determine what happens on graduation day. So in terms of marshals, We rank currently, we will rank currently at the end of the third 9 weeks. Next year, we will move that to the end of the first semester. And those rankings will play or have an impact on graduation. We are then required at the conclusion of every school year, once all grades are calculated from both first and second semester, to do what we call a final ranking. And then at that point in time, that is what we would consider an official ranking for X amount of students in a particular grade level. So again, this policy addresses ceremonial practices only. So I could be number one in the class ranking process. Things occur, we do the final ranking at the conclusion of the school year, and I may then be number 2 or 3. And that has happened in the past.
And I was gonna give an example, Bobby. That happened to us last year, the year before last. The young lady actually had a scholarship for being the quote unquote, we don't have salutatorians anymore, but she was number 2 at the ranking process, but dropped the number 3 or 4 and actually lost her scholarship. But we tell everybody, you know, the final ranking is the final ranking. This is just for, like you said, ceremony as far as marshals and, you know, going through that forward. But yeah, she actually lost her scholarship during that time.
So again, for clarification, the juniors and the ceremony of selecting ends at the semester. Again, because we should never have to go into a system and manipulate that system to determine something and award and have credit when it's a full credit course. That's a problem. So that's what we fixed. So the next part of the conversation and what I've been reading is that kids are being told there's no need to take AP classes after the semester. That is not true. That moves up to the senior year, and what you just addressed, there is, because of class ranking. That's important. Scholarships are tied to that. Admission to universities are tied to all of that. So there is a reason to continue to take AP classes beyond the junior year first semester. So there is, but that information has been shared that there's no need. That is not true.
So begin with the change that we have implemented. If I'm a current junior and I'm enrolled in AP courses this semester, then that AP course will calculate into my ranking the next school year because that course is completed as part of my historical grades. So there is a benefit in taking AP courses. Again, this policy does not take away the weighted portion of a student's GPA. Only thing this policy does is changes when class ranking occurs.
And again, Bobby, with a certified final grade.
That is correct.
With a certified final grade.
Yes, sir, Mr. Frank.
If I may, so Mr. Bobby, the marshal will be determined for this year at the end of the third 9 weeks.
That is correct. Our request is because,
Okay.
again, it was not clearly communicated to students and parents that we just simply go back to the process we had in place and delay the implementation of ranking occurring at the end of the second semester to the 23-24 school year.
And then the rankings this year will be at the end of school?
We always have to do a final ranking.
Final
once
ranking
up.
at the
Yes.
end of school, okay. Keeping that over here. And next year, the marshals will be determined at the end of the first semester,
That is correct.
okay? And the ranking.
And for senior class, I'm
and-
sorry.
And for senior class. And any final rankings will still be at the end of the year.
That is correct.
Okay, does both of these, this year and next year, does it take care of any kind of situations we have with kids who graduate after that first semester? Because we have the kids that, for whatever reason, they graduate, and we already got some, I'm sure, this year that they're finished. They won't be coming back. And now, will these policies take care of this year and next year with those kids?
Right. So what we will have to do for this school year, and we've done this in the past couple of years, is those students who decide to leave in January, if they are eligible for one of the honor grads, and that is one of the cum laudes, We would just have to identify those outside of the ranking process. Schools will be responsible for identifying that. And they can do that simply by looking at their final transcript.
And then if they come back, some will come back in
Some
March,
can-
some will not, but if they come back, they have that distinction.
Right, they have
Okay.
that distinction. They are then eligible for a court and also eligible to be identified in the graduation program.
Thank you.
That clarifies my point of confusion. We were talking about addressing two separate issues, marshals and then final ranking for graduation.
That's right.
So that clears that up for me. Yeah.
This will happen that, we had to go back on this year's policies because of failure to communicate and put it in handbooks. I hope that that's something that will happen clearly next year, that we won't have to go in midstream and change a policy.
That is an excellent point, that this needs to be addressed very early on
Yeah.
with everyone, and especially those who are on schedule to graduate and rank for a marshal, to be a marshal.
Yeah.
Needs to
Mr.
be
Chair and
clarified.
board members, I can promise you that would take place.
Thank you.
This is a good policy. It's a fair policy. It takes out any human error. It takes out anything that may not be above board. It takes all that away. And so it's a good policy, and we own that. We failed to communicate that it did not show up in student handbooks. But again, I promise you, it's taken care of.
Thank you, Dr. Williamson. That it certainly appears to be the case as I read this and peruse it. Are there any? Yes, sir.
If no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we approve policy 3450 with the red effective with 2023-24 school year.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Policy 3450 is approved with the red addition.
Mr. Chair, if I may, Ms. Jessica, how are we going to communicate this out to schools and to the public, please?
We will immediately post this on our social media channels today, and we will continue to promote that and make sure everybody knows what's going on. And we can also, if we need to, post it on our websites to our high schools and our district site, so there's no confusion.
Is there anyone, could there be a reversal of some parent saying that by us changing it, we denied their child some benefit? Is there a reversal? In other words, the policy as it's written right now, before we change it, could we be denying some other child a benefit? I'm just curious.
I don't think so. And if there's some individual cases, if they were sharing information with Bobby, we'll take a look at that. We do want to be fair in everything that we do, but on a case by case, if there's a real concern, we'll take a look.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on then to policy 3460, which is another addition that you were given before the beginning of the meeting, graduation requirements. There is one notation in red. It's a general statute there, about almost one half of the way down the page. And then there is another one on page 4 of 9. Number 3, future ready core course of study credits required for students entering the 9th grade for the first time, 2021, 22, and thereafter. I'm assuming everything else is as it was before.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I want to speak to General Statute 115C-407.12. In terms of the interstate military compact, which really says this, that if a military child transfers into the public schools of Robeson County, then our graduation requirement is 28 units, 4 less than the max that they can obtain. This states clearly, as a freshman, wherever that student was enrolled in, they are bound by that course requirement in terms of number of credits for graduation. And Ms. Clearly, correct me, that's what it states. So again, if they started out of state and high school requirement was 20 units, then that's what they can graduate with, that we can't automatically make them, require them to get to 28. Correct me, Bobby?
That's correct.
There are 2 other notations in red as I continue to peruse here. Page 6 of 9 reads, future ready occupational course of study credits required for students entering 9th grade for the first time in 2021, 22, and thereafter. And then there's another insert of language in red on page 7 of 9, down near the bottom, number 3, children of military families. In order to facilitate the on-time graduation of children of military families as defined in policy 4050, children of military families, the board adopts the following policy provisions for children of military families. And then the last part of that sentence is stricken.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we accept policy 3460.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. That brings us to policy 3620, extracurricular activities and student organizations. Yes, sir.
Looks like policy 3620 is a handshake to the previous policy we just approved. And it's just red writing is clarification of military families. I make a motion, if no discussion, we approve policy 3620 with the red requirement changes.
Chairman,
Second.
got a question. Page 4 of 8. It's on 4 of 8 and 5 of 8. At the very bottom at D where it says undue influence. There's a lot of stuff there. If you look at athletics, and I'll give you just a minute if you hadn't seen it. And it goes on to section E too, where it deals with middle school. And as you read it, the reason I brought this up, that is pretty strong when you get over to 5 of 8. When it says employees in violation of this subsection will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. If you read that. And I'm kind of one that I'm not saying we want to look at changing this now, but if I think there should be some discussion that if it's written in here and things are violated, what do we do? And like I said, this is pretty strong. And you know what it's gotten here basically is contacting by someone or somebody about athletes going to other schools and playing. And then it gets into what can happen dealing with coaches and in the administration. So I guess it says action up to and including termination, and that would come back on, I guess, the superintendent and the board who looks at that. So if we're gonna leave this in here, which is fine with me, if it's left in here, I do think it needs to be, in my opinion, printed and given to every administrator and coach and AD in the county, so they're aware of it. Because now, this is one I looked at, had no idea until I sit there and started reading it. And I think they all need to be aware of how strong this is written. That's just my thought, because it's strong.
Mr. Craig, my personal view of this is that the phrase up to and including leaves some latitude there.
It does. It definitely does. Yeah, it
Decision
does.
making.
Yeah, it does.
Any further questions? There's Dr. Williamson.
Mr. Chair, members, if you give me a minute, let me get our athletic director, because I do want us to address this point in terms of that happening. If you give me a minute to get in, please.
sir.
I'll go get-
Yes, sir.
It also includes, does it include, students that are not subjective, that are interfering with school athletics? Like, I think we may have had a situation to occur too, where a student from another school, made it difficult for a student athlete that possibly, removed them from playing sports. I know, but I'm saying, is that? Okay. Okay.
My interpretation is that if there is an employee who is enticing or drawing or otherwise persuading a student or parent to move from one system, from one attendance area to another for the benefit of participating in athletics, that's the way that I interpret it. I think one of the considerations would be, if this occurs, is it a first-time violation or is it a repeated violation? I think that would be a point of consideration.
We can't hear you, Mr. Craig.
Right, right.
What I was saying, it doesn't say that determination has to be done. It just says, it could be up to. There would be leeway, I'm gonna say, between the athletic director and the superintendent. At least those two would be involved in it.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you. Mr. Hart, can you address what we talked about in terms of athletes being recruited by whoever?
So the High School Athletic Association, they have something in place for recruiting athletics on the high school level. And according to their rules, their handbook, that can be up to a year's suspension if they are found to be recruiting an athlete. We have had several incidences in the county where something has been brought to me concerning a coach recruiting an athlete, a parent going out recruiting an athlete. The problem we run into is when you ask for evidence. They say, hey, we got a text message, we got something on Facebook, wherever. And when I ask for the evidence, it never comes. The parent don't want to turn it in, the student don't want to turn it in. So we don't have any evidence to, bring back and present. So that's the problem we run to in Robeson County as far as recruiting.
And in your meetings, you share that information with ADs and coaches that is not a practice with the public schools of Robeson County.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We discussed that. It's brought up at several of our in-district AD meetings, at the middle school level and the high school level. And, yeah, our coaches know and our ADs know that that's not permissible at any time. But we do know at some point in time, there are some coaches that may talk to other athletes, but again, when we ask for the evidence, we never get any.
Mr. Gentry, and if I may just add, and Mr. Jerome, if you would speak to this, on down when you get into below E, with middle school, the middle school students going to high schools, it is permissible for high school coaches or ADs to go to a middle school and talk with athletes that would be coming to their school. And we know we got a lot of middle schools that the kids or athletes might go to more than one high school. And I could take any school, but if Lumberton's got kids from Magnolia that's coming to their school, when the Lumberton coaches go to Magnolia, they should just have kids in there that would be actually eligible to go to Lumberton. And it would be up to the school, Magnolia, to make sure those are the kids that's in there.
Yes, sir, that is correct. We have coaches every year. Our high school coaches go down to the feeder schools to talk to those middle school athletes and, just to make them aware of what's going on at the high school. But they do know they can only talk to those students that are going to be coming to their high school that's in their district. And that's the way it's been worked out for years. Now, there are situations, I told someone earlier, there are situations to where, let's say, Lumberton High School may have future pirate night, and they want to invite Magnolia's basketball team or Lumberton's basketball team. Well, we don't want to penalize a kid that's on Magnolia's basketball team that might be going to St. Paul's High School to not be able to come to that night, that we still want to be a part of that team. And that can be a fine line, but they're just there to be recognized that night. They're not there to talk to the coaches or be recruited or anything like that. So we have allowed that in the past.
And that's a great point, because throughout the county, we know we got overlapping lines. And you got a kid that's played basketball all year into 8th grade with South Robeson. And that child is more than likely it's Purnell Sweat or it's Fairmont. But if they've been on that South Robeson team all year and Fairmont or Sweat's having a night, they should be able to go with that basketball team.
Yes, sir.
Because
Yeah.
all they're going to do is recognize them at halftime and they go back and sit down.
Right, and that's all they do, yeah.
That's all they do.
It's not like they're talking to the coaches or anything like that. They're just there to be recognized. One of the other situations we have, and you all know, we have out-of-district transfers. And so that's, an athlete, they don't like to coach at this school. Well, they put in for out-of-district transfer and it's approved, so they end up they don't like to coach at school A, so they put in for out-of-district transfer to go to school B. And you know as well as I do, it's approved 99% of the time. And that's kind of another way that they get around it.
I have a question. Is there a suspension time if a student decides they want to transfer, say from Purnell to Lumberton High, and they're basically because of sports, are they required to sit out so many months, or can they just transfer and just take up the sport and go?
No, sir, they can transfer, they can get out of district transfer and start playing immediately. There's no sit out time at all.
Mr. Jerome,
Yes, sir.
does this include students transferring out of the county?
For a student that's transferring out of county, we have to release that student And the out-of-county district that they're going to has to accept that student. So if we don't release them and the other county don't accept them, they can't go there and participate. But that's how that works. As we have to release them and they have to accept them.
And to add to that, that requires a signature from the sending superintendent and the receiving superintendent.
Yes, sir. Sure does. Require both signatures. And we do have a couple of students that are, they live in Robeson County, but they're all going out of county to another school. And both those signatures are on that form.
Mr. On ours with the student leaving Red Springs and going to St. Paul's and to participate in athletics, they can participate immediately. They can do that one time during the school year.
Yes, sir, that's correct. They
Just
can
one
do,
time?
yes, sir, they can do out of district transfer one time. In the past, and I think this policy was changed maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But before that, they could do out of district transfer for 3 seasons. They could play football at Purnell Swift, basketball at Lumberton, and baseball at Red Springs. So at some point in time, that policy was changed for just one out of district transfer, and that did help a lot, because when they were able to transfer 3 different times, that was tough.
That was back like 2013, 14 when it was changed, and we said they could change one time, but even if they went back to their base school, they were still not supposed to be eligible.
Right,
That's
because
right.
they had already done an out of district transfer, so they couldn't even get, once they transferred to that school, they were there. If they wanted to go back to their base school, they couldn't participate in athletics
Now that's during that school year, right?
during that school year.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Take me to the next year. They went from school A to school B. They can stay there and play that year. The next school year, they have to get that transfer approved again then.
Yes, sir. They have to go out of district transfer every year.
So it's got
Yes,
to be
sir.
approved in for the next year.
Yeah.
So we
Yes,
got
sir.
the one time again.
Yes, sir.
Coach, I have 2 questions. Who has to initiate the action of transferring from one school to another for athletic purposes? Does it have to be documented that it was at the student athlete's request?
It should be from the parents.
Okay.
Should be from the parents' request. Yeah, not the student athlete, not the coach. They should be at the parents' discretion.
Okay. And does there have to be a substantial amount of evidence to support that request?
No, sir. No. It's the out of district transfer form that you fill out, and it's brought to you as a board, and like I said, 99% of the time, those out of district transfers are approved.
Okay. I have another question, and this may or may not be for you. And I'm going back to the stated policy here. In the last phrase of that sentence, it says termination of employment. Now, a coach, other than a volunteer coach, if he's already on staff, then he has another duty, classroom teacher. Does termination of employment mean only terminating his coaching status?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not sure what that policy states as far as termination, but obviously it would be from coaching. But if it affects his job also, I'm not sure, but I can't answer that one.
Our practice at this point, and Ms. Thompson helped us, is that we're not connecting the two unless, there's some issues clearly violated with that. So we would not terminate their ability to teach because their license would not, unless there's some criminal charge tied to that. Then that would put that teaching position at risk.
And before I get down, if a parent approaches a coach and says, hey, I'd like for my son or my daughter to come play for you, then that coach should direct that parent to the principal. That's how that should work. And then let the principal take it from there. And then, of course, most of the principals are going to say, you can come here to school. You know, we got a couple principals that say, hey, we're fine without you. You know, we can use you, we're fine without you, but it should be directed to the principal. The coach should never be the one to stand there and say, yeah, we'd love to have you, bring him on. It should be directed to the principal.
Mr.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I have a quick question.
On a lighter note, did anybody watch CNN News this morning? This coach in the middle school put on a uniform and played with her team and just was doing layups, 3-pointers, and needless to say, they won the game. It was just absolute, blew away the game. And needless to say, when the game was over, she was fired. A middle school coach played with her team in a game. Did you see it?
Yeah,
Jerome?
we actually talked about that yesterday at the middle school game that, yeah, the coach.
Can you believe that?
People do some crazy things now. They do some crazy things.
But anyway, hopefully we do not have coaches that are that passionate.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just maybe from clarifying, that's the sentence up there at the top. The employees in violation of this subsection will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. I mean, do we need to talk about changing how that is worded there? Because it's strong. And now my opinion is not termination of teaching. It would be dealing with coaching. But that when it says action up to and including, that doesn't mean it's going to happen. That means I'm going to say the superintendent and the athletic director, that's going to be their decision on looking at that when they get the evidence in that they get. It gives them the leeway to do that. And sometimes you might want to leave that leeway in there instead of putting boundaries on it that says this is all you can do.
That is correct. Rather not change that language and let the facts dictate our actions on that once we conclude the investigation. And if there's a clear violation, we'll take action or make that recommendation. And then we have to keep in mind, the coaching is extracurricular. And again, so unless there's a clear violation that would put that teaching license at risk, example of the middle school, that was a clear violation of that. So again, we need up to remain and let the facts dictate our action.
I think it underscores the seriousness of the situation.
And what we have always told our ADs and our coaches is that, you know, if you're caught recruiting, you can be suspended up to a year from coaching. We've never really included their teaching job in it. It's just coaching.
Yes, sir. You have a question?
Mr. Chair, I heard previously mentioned the limitation on transfers twice within a school year. Is that in this policy or is that referenced in another policy? State guidelines?
I don't think, is it in that policy, Mr. Bobby?
No, that
I
would
think
be,
so.
no, it doesn't address it.
It should be in here, should not.
And then there are certain situations where a student needs to transfer schools. This school is just not right for them. And then they may need a new school, a new outlook. And there are situations where their parent may work at school B. They stay in school age district, but their mom or dad works for this school. So it just makes sense for them to go to school B.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Terry has a question online.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a quick question. One of the challenges that I have with the transfer request forms that we get is when we look at the parents' rationale for why they want to transfer their child, it's the form allows them to just make a comment. And, you know, all the comments are all over the place. And when we're trying to evaluate these rationales, it would be a lot easier for us if there was, when the individual's completing the form, if they had like a drop down where they could, because there's 3 or 4, you know, typical rationales, you know, such as my child is I've got a child, this school, and I want them to be able to ride with somebody or whatever. I have a problem with a teacher or something. There's typical, if we could just make a drop down and have the typical request reasons, such as maybe like, athletics, it would be a lot easier for us to sort of evaluate those forms more efficiently. And then maybe, have 3 or 4 of the typical reasons and then have an other and allow them to make comments if they need to. It would be a lot more efficient for us when we're evaluating those transfer forms, because I mean, it's 40, 50, 60 pages. There's quite a few of them.
I don't think, Mr. Terry, unless something's changed, Mr. Jerome, athletics is not supposed to be a reason that they can transfer.
That is correct. That is correct. They shouldn't be able to transfer just for athletics.
And Mr. Terry, looking at our old transfer, we do have a series of drop downs for them to choose. So when that parent looks at those and says, this isn't one that I want, that's where we begin to get all of those statements from parents if they do not fit. But yes, we do have a list of approximately, looks like 10 or 12 different just standard reasons for wanting to transfer. So yeah, our form already addresses that.
Okay, well, maybe if we could get it in a digital format, we can sort it, in a couple of different ways, because I think it's typically like in alphabetical order by student's name or something. But if we could, get it in a digital format, we could, play around with those fields and kind of customize it.
Whose final responsibility is it to review the transfer request? Who's it incumbent on? Is it the principal or a committee? Who considers the request?
I'll defer that question to Mr. Bobby.
So our policy, the way our policy is written, we open up the transfer process March 1st. It stays open for a month. Once we close it, then we forward all of those transfer requests to each individual principals. Principals then approve or deny that based on several different reasons. Then we compile all of those transfer requests, and then we present it to the board, if I'm not mistaken, in the month of June. So that's kind of a rough timeline. And the transfer process, and I think this has worked well the last couple of years, we are following the policy, and it is only open one time a school year. So we're not doing transfers every month. That transfer process is open in the spring. We close it at an appropriate time and then get that information to the board. But again, comes to us, we get it to principals, we give principals a specific timeline to close that out, and then we present it to the board.
I have one other question this does strictly relate to athletics, and we're getting off a little bit. We're on the same page. The one about tackle football, the word tackle is in red. Students in the 6th grade are eligible to participate in all interscholastic athletics except tackle football. Have there been occasions where that has happened, or is that just to preclude that from happening?
No, sir, that hasn't happened. Several years ago, the state started allowing 6th graders to participate in middle school athletics, and they let them participate in every sport except tackle football.
So
That's
this is just
something
reinforcing that.
Sir?
This is just reinforcing that.
Right, yeah, they let them participate in everything except tackle football. That's just something that the state put in there from DPI. Yes, sir.
Any further questions? Mr. Jerome, Coach Jerome? If there are none?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we accept policy 3620 with suggested modifications.
Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you. Thank you, Coach.
All right, thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
So we see our new athletic director in his first meeting. Oh, Look and learn.
I've had the privilege of working with both of these men. They are excellent individuals, both of them. Yeah. Okay. We will move on. There is an editorial change relative to websites, just addition of websites on page 8 of 8, 3620. And that, I think that we can just accept that as information. This is not something that we need to analyze. So moving on then to policy 4050, children of military families. I'm glad there's a lot of language in this this particular series of policies that addresses military families. And having read over this in specific reference to the portion that's in red, there's a substantial amount of the paragraph in letter B. I don't see anything that that needs to be added to or corrected in my assessment.
Mr. Chair, it looks like the policy in red with children of military families are defining active, inactive, and deceased military officials' children. Seems like that's the only modifications here. I make a motion to accept policy with the upgrades, 4050.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. And that brings us to 4100, requirements for initial entry. And again, the language addresses the language in red specifically addresses military families. And Dr. Emanuel, this refers back to your question earlier about the required age. The last part of that, the statement beginning out of district and those who have not reached the age of 5 on or before August 31st. And then there's a cross-reference that's stated in red on page 3 of 3, children of military families, policy 4050 reverts and connected with that earlier policy.
Chair, I would like to call everyone's attention. It's page 2 of 3 of 4100. It's dealing with a gifted situation. We faced that one time in my career, and that is a strict testing procedure to get a child in before he's of age. And I don't know if anyone has had to face that in the last 5 or 6 years. That's before a child's not of age and can get in. There is a way to get in, but it's gifted and talented, and it's a very strict process. But I don't know if we've ever had, Mrs. Superintendent, if you've ever had to address a case like that.
I have not.
But there is a way to get in. But you have to be an Einstein to pass those tests.
So the way I'm reading that is that would be considered on a case-by-case
Oh, yeah.
basis.
Oh, yeah, the parent has to provide all that information and that testing that child is gifted and talented.
Okay, thanks for that notation,
Thank
that
you.
information. Appreciate it.
It also mentions that the principal shall follow guidelines established by the State Board of Education for like a 4-year-old. So it sounds like this policy is overlapping with some state board policy.
Dr. Manning, I will ask you, in your experience, did you have many cases where
We
this
had
applied?
one case and the child did not meet all the testing requirements that they set out, you know, for the child to be declared ready to come. And this child, it was not the academics, it was the social development that was determined. There was a committee and it was the social development that was determined. The child was really immature. So, yeah, one instance, I've only had one instance in my life that somebody tried to get in with their child before they were of age, and it was because the child was gifted, and the child was academically gifted, just wasn't socially ready.
Right. I think the social component is
Yeah,
equally important, really.
yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on policy 4100?
I make a motion to accept policy 4100 with the additional upgrades and highlighted in red.
Okay. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Moving on to 4110. Immunization and health requirements for school admission. As I peruse it, well, there are several notations in red. Some of the ones that near the end of the policy on the last page are general statutes and informational. But there is an important one there on 1 of 4, letter I. I think I'm pronouncing this right. Pneumococcal conjugate only for children entering school before age 5. Of course, that's referencing immunization requirements. Any comments, questions about that particular highlighted in red, or any of the ones on 4 of 4? Again, this addresses military families and their special circumstances in that regard.
Mr. Chair, this is pretty straightforward. I'd like to make a motion to accept this policy.
Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you. Moving on to policy 4130, discretionary admission. There is substantial language in red here. Yes.
There's a statement at the bottom that addresses what the athletic director said a while ago. It says any reason having to do with athletics or participation in athletics is not a valid or sufficient explanation of need. That's a mission of criteria. So it's right there in our policy.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Dr. Williamson, this question may be for you. And I'm referencing, of course, letter A, under number 1, an explanation of need will be considered valid grounds for discretionary admission only if there are compelling specific circumstances indicating that the student should attend school in the school system. And I know this is a loaded question, but what constitutes compelling circumstances?
One example would be court ordered, and we do get some of those. It's probably the most compelling that we deal with.
And the language in red on 4130 addresses specific requirements that are to be reviewed before the admission of students applying for transfer.
Mr. Chair, if I may, one of the things that we really have to safeguard against is we get a lot of kids that's presented for enrollment in the system who have been long-term from another LEA, so we really have to pay attention to that and do that background, because if you don't, then you will admit kids who may have had a weapon in another public school unit. So while we talk to that, we really spend a lot of time on that.
That's where the word discretionary plays a large role. You have to take in all the factors and information and references and all that goes along with that.
And so if I may, this has a large impact at our high schools. So our high school principals do a good job of ensuring the students that we get after that initial enrollment period, they come with a transcript, they have a conversation with their receiving school to see if there are any outlying suspensions or any discipline issues that may have an impact when that student enrolls in our district. So our high school principals do a great job of following through and ensuring that with the students there, they're truly eligible to be at their school.
And Mr. Bobby, there is, you can shed some light on this, there is a digital information base that principals can review to certify any pending disciplinary actions or concluded.
No, they cannot view a student until that student is actually enrolled in the district. So that is the reason that they require a transcript. They may have a conversation with the exiting principal or administrative staff to say, hey, John Doe's here. They're trying to enroll. Tell me a little bit about the student prior to us putting them in our system. Because once we put them in our system, they're ours.
And that was my point, and not that any principal who is in the sending role would violate ethical actions. You know, we know how emotions sometimes can play a part of this, and in terms of being able to verify particular actions that have been stated that have taken place regarding that student, and particularly reference and discipline. There is a database that can be accessed.
Yes. So in the state of North Carolina, once we enroll a child, we're able to see all incidences prior to their arrival to our system if they're coming from out of the county.
But that's only after they have been
That's
enrolled.
only afterwards.
So if there's something appears that on that database is contrary, that's very significant, is there any recourse at that point?
No, not at that point.
Mr. Gentry, just for point of clarification, and I can't speak for everybody, but I know majority of the high school principals, I know myself at least, I call everybody who's going to be out of district transfer. Mr. Bobby gives the list. We call, or I call, talk to the principal at the school to see if there was any kind of thing before I ever enrolled. I've only denied like 4 people, and 3 of them were long-term suspended in Bladen County or Cumberland County, and those are the only ones I've denied since I've been at St. Paul's.
Thank you, Jason.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bobby, it might be a question for you. I heard you mention a particular month that we open it up for school transfers. Is that in general guidelines or is that in policy?
I think that's a practice of that we can set that to determine that timeline with that piece. I do want to raise another point in terms of admitting students to our schools. The federal law says that if a parent presents a child to be enrolled in a school, if they have the documentation in hand, we have to admit that student. We can't say, go home, wait 3 or 4 days. If they present themselves and the documentation is there, at that point, we have to enroll them. And then if after the fact, we find out something different, then we can disenroll. But we want to be clear, it is a federal violation not to enroll students who parents present them, and they have all the documentation. Dr. Emmanuel, help us with that. That has always been the case.
You're absolutely correct, and we have a larger problem with high school students. You know, you got to put them someplace till you get some validation. Danger is dropped off and you say, no, you got to go, come back later. They leave and something happened, God forbid. So you have to place them someplace till you can get some value. And like the superintendent said, it's no big deal. You can move them. You know what I mean? And little children usually come with parents. So, and we've had probably the biggest problem is non-English speaking children. And if they come with a birth certificate and they're 10 or 11, you got to place them in the 4th or 5th. I don't care if they don't speak English. You have to place them where their age appropriateness is. And we had some instances where the principals wanted to put them in 1st and 2nd because they can't speak English. No, that's not how that works. So you're right, absolutely right. The biggest thing is you got to think about the safety of these children and how they're feeling, not for our convenience, how we feel of placing them. It's no big deal to unroll and re-enroll a child in a class.
So that speaks to my question, Mr. Bobby, a few minutes ago, because, you know, in my mind, I was wondering, you know, on the outside most extreme case, let's say that that student had committed a felony at some point, and maybe it was under the radar. Maybe it was not at school and he was not suspended for it. But there is a way to go back and review that student's personal history, whether it's school related or not, and that there is recourse in the event that there are findings to substantiate that.
Mr. Gentry, if I may, what Mr. Suggs was saying, I'm sure, you know, while they're enrolling that student, let's say they show up, I'm going to say September, and they're going through that process. Mr. Suggs, like he said, or one of the people with enrolling, they're on the phone calling where this child come from. I mean, you enrolling, but you're also calling and checking, because when they show up September, October out of the county, and I'm going to say high school, or if you're getting to the upper middle school grades, it raises sometimes an eyebrow. Why are they leaving and coming here now? Right. And so they do a great job, I'm sure, because any of us that's been in the school, it does happen. And they're coming there because they're in trouble from somewhere else. And you just check it out. But like Dr. Main said, we have to enroll them, and then you go from there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it comes back to my mind, how do we legally justify being fair to everyone that voluntarily wants to transfer if we don't have, I know we have a date, but we don't have it in policy.
Yes, we have a date in policy. The policy is 4150. And in that policy, it says the request process is open March 1 through April 1. And then it does have a process for students who move into the district after that process closes.
I want to add something to Bobby's. Got it. Also, Mr. Brewer, there are a list of reasons that you can give for transfer. And it's not just, I can ask for transfer. You got to meet one of those criteria in there. And unless that's changed, has it changed, Bobby?
No, ma'am.
Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Gentry, I make a motion, we accept policy 4130.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. We'll move on then.
May I add one thing, and I'm sorry, I know we voted. And so we see a lot of students who move in, I'm gonna stay with grandma, grandfather. What we require then is you gotta be certified that they're your legal guardians, that they can make a decision. It's not as simple as just, I'm moving in. No, you gotta have certification and that grandma, whoever is now the legal guardian and can make a decision for that student. And that's our practice, correct?
That is correct. That would be an educational affidavit.
That does bring up another question. What about the emancipated student that can, and I don't know what documents that are necessary to certify that, but the way I interpreted it, he's able to make his own decisions about where he attends school and as well as others.
A lot of individuals think because they turn 18, that's what that means. That piece actually said you need to be paying bills, you need to be an adult on your own to make, just the fact that you turn 18 does not give you that right.
Okay, moving on to policy code 4155. Yes, ma'am.
You on 4155, right?
Yes, ma'am.
The state of North Carolina legislation gives the principal the right to grade and classify. And I don't think there's anything that needs discussing, in my opinion, of this because it's clear cut. And I recommend it. I'll make a motion that we approve 4155.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion is,
Mr. Chair,
yes, ma'am.
student insurance is self-explanatory, and I think unless somebody wants to say something, I make a motion that we approve student insurance program 4220 as well.
All right, it's been moved and second that we approve policy 4220, student insurance program.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Brings us to policy series 4240. And notated in red at point number 1 under A near the very bottom, conduct speaking to sexual offense, conduct with or involving a child. And it states several examples. School employee, contractor, or volunteer is legally required to report to local school law enforcement when the employee or volunteer knows or reasonably should know that a child has been a victim of any of the following crimes. I do have a question there, and it's simply this: is this a big problem? I'll just put it in simple terms. Is this going on to a large extent, any extent, some extent? This kind of situation, just in general, is this a major occurrence? Does anybody know?
We have not seen any unusual reporting of that. There's always some cases with that, but the policy makes it clear that it's not our responsibility to investigate. It's our responsibility to report. In fact, law enforcement would tell you, do not do an investigation, simply report it.
May I make a comment? I would like to say that our counselors, social workers, and teachers, they do a really bang-up job of trying to stay on top of reporting and assisting these children in things they do at Christmas and other time, like clothing and all. and trying to stay on top of helping these children. I think that our employees do a great job of this, Mr. Gentry. I do.
Dr. Williamson would, add into what you said there. So actually, our law enforcement would determine what is considered sexual offense. And then my understanding is the board would make a decision after that judgment's made by our local officials.
Yes, in terms of taking action towards that employee, yes.
Mr. Gentry,
Yes,
I was
sir.
just gonna add, and, as many years as we've talked about child abuse and just, I'm gonna say at home or wherever, all I think of our employees and the area Dr. Emmanuel mentioned, they know what's required. I mean, if they hear or suspect something, you're obligated to report it to the principal, and then they make a contact with an agency. Again, they're not investigating. And this has been reiterated many times. And again, if the agencies handle it, it takes it out of our hands where we're not dealing with it. And they come back, and I can't remember now if we actually get a report or not. I don't know if we do. I don't believe we do, but I'm not sure. And then if it's dealing with personnel, then that's also done. So with me saying that, I just say I make a motion we approve policy 4240 and -7312.
All right, it has been moved and seconded that we approve policy 4240/7312. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. All right, brings us to policy 4300, student behavior policies. Again, I think I'm only seeing one proposed addition that's in red there at the top of page 1 of 4. Teachers, school-based administrators, parents, and law enforcement will be consulted when existing student behavior policies are revised or new policies are created. I think we've already alluded to that in terms of athletics. I think that I know that applies to any and all policies, because we know that there can be misunderstandings. You hear the old saying, ignorance is not an excuse, but at the same time, we still need to make every effort to make it clear and known and understood by all interested parties. So I think that was well-founded.
Mr. Gentry, while you're looking, just a comment under this, nothing here specific. But I think we need to keep in mind, and I don't know what you can do, but kids, and I'm gonna say the small kids, if they're 4th, 5th, 7th, and 8th, they're not small. But, and even high school, but the kids that go in the room, and I know we got lap and that, but they're just constantly doing something to disrupt that class with 25 other kids in there. And let's say it's a 3rd grader, and the teacher literally can't teach. I think it's something we just always need to be aware of, because I've always felt 2 children don't have the right to disrupt the learning for 23 other children. But it happens, and we all know it happens, and they're not doing nothing violent. They're just being disruptive. And in some cases, this 3rd and 4th grader, they're swinging at the teacher, trying to hit the teacher. I mean, it happens. And, but I think we just need to, I know we're aware of it. If I had the answer, I'd be moving on across the United States. So I don't have the answer, but, just be aware that goes on. And I've always believed if you don't have discipline in the class, you can't teach. I don't care how smart you are, that class has got to have discipline. But sometimes it is very, very difficult for that teacher to do that in that classroom.
Chair, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, policy 4300 in red, I think the revision or the addition is that the communication piece would be behavior policy be revised or new policies are created, that everybody would be acknowledged. And looking at page 2 of 4, I think the key ingredient is that at the beginning of the school year, principal shall make available to each student and parent all of the following. And the first one is Code of Student Conduct. So I think this procedure is pretty cut and dried. And for the recommendations of upgrades, I make a motion that we'll accept.
Dr. Williamson has alluded a number of times about updating the student code of conduct and the handbook in general that goes out at the beginning of the year. And I'm sure that this aspect is always under close consideration and close scrutiny. And when changes or updates are indicated, that's done. I have confidence in that.
You also have in place, I understand, programs that if our central staff can acknowledge other staff or committees, if that student needs to be in LAP or RASP or whatever, or EC type program, those determinations can be made and validated.
That is correct. And I want to make a point to what Mr. Craig made reference to. What we're actually seeing now is that behavior from some pre-K kids, kindergarten kids, who become violent, who kicking, biting, those kinds of behaviors. And so the compulsory attended age says that the safety of the classroom, if it's a pre-K child, we can put that child out. If it is a kindergarten child, we can, and we have done that for the safety of other students within that classroom. And so I want to be clear, that is a practice. And Bobby and Dr. Carr, correct me, we are not obligated until age 7. But what we're having to do more than ever before at that lower grade span is not have kids in billing because they put other kids' violent behaviors towards teachers, towards students. And we just, and then we try to work with the parent to make sure you need to, provide some type of help before age 7 when we really have to enroll the student in. We're not trying to be, but the safety of that classroom takes a priority.
And Dr. Williams, that help would be implemented outside of the regular classroom situation. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The help that you indicated for that student would be exclusive of anything to do with the classroom.
That's correct. A lot of the services that we will provide and can provide is linked to being enrolled at age 7. And then in a lot of cases, it's dictated by, if you're an exceptional child, by the IEP.
Okay, are there any further comments, questions on policy 4300, student behavior policies?
I believe Mr. Henry made a motion. I'll second it.
Second it. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Policy is accepted. That brings us to attendance, policy 4400. I'm not seeing any notations in red. Yes, sir. Well, I'm sorry, there is one, there's a reference.
Policy 4400 on page 4 of 7 includes inactive military in relations to validation for excused absences. And that's the only recommendation of change for this policy. I think it's cut and dried. Also, I make a motion, if no other discussion, to accept.
Thank you for noticing that. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Policy is accepted as presented, recognizing that notation in red, which is important. Okay, brings us to policy 4700, student records, beginning with page 1 of 14.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
this too is cut and dry. It is what it is, and there's not much you can do about it. And a lot of it's federal law. I make a recommendation, make a motion that we pass it as is.
Okay, thank you. There are some, and I won't call them minor, nothing that's in red that's been submitted for addition or change, but there are some that don't change the spirit and the meaning and the purpose. So it's been moved and seconded that we accept policy 4700 as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to policy 6125, administering medicines to students. Yes, sir.
Policy 6125 is upgrade is in reference to general statutes. No discussion. I make a motion to accept this policy upgrade as written, policy 6125.
Thank you. Been moved and seconded that we accept policy 6125 as presented with the general statute additions. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. That brings us to policy 6140, student wellness. And to my view, there are only two corrections. There is a stricken statement or partial statement in red on page 5 of 10, referring to what students can purchase in the way of foods other than, well, I would say in addition to what's offered in the cafeteria. And the vending machine sales must comply with requirements. It gives a general statute. And then the part where it also includes Eat Smart North Carolina recommended standards for students. And all this is about eating healthy and not being given into temptations for snack foods that are not good for students or adults either one.
Mr. Chair, policy 6140 in red states that Eat Smart North Carolina's recommended standard for all foods. I think it's built into our program that we have to meet government guidelines to meet all those food requirements. So the recommendation here is to remove that wording. If no further discussion, I make a motion to accept policy 6140 with upgrades requested.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we accept policy 6140 as presented with the red additions. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Then that brings us to operation of school nutrition services. And there is a statement, which is partially in red. School officials may not discriminate based on race, sex, including pregnancy, childbirth, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Goes on in terms of operational standards. I don't know that there have been any issues in that regard, but just to ensure and to preclude any issues arising from those conditions, I'm sure there was a basis for that being entered there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Craig hadn't objected, and he has a lot of experience in this area. So with that in mind, I make a motion that we approve this policy 6220.
All right, thank you. Moved and seconded that we accept policy 6220 as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That brings us to safety and student transportation services. There is a paragraph, and if you recall, we went back and addressed the paragraph in the beginning with that addresses COVID. And a lot of the language, if not all of it, in this stricken paragraph relates to the COVID situation.
Mr. Chair, policy 6305 is asking, is the upgrade is to remove COVID-19
Yes, sir.
policy, as you stated, and we're no longer in a requirement around pandemic procedures. No other discussion. I make a motion to accept policy 6305 with suggested changes.
Thank you. Second. Been moved in second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Brings us to 7130, licensure.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
may
ma'am.
I ask Ms. Thompson a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Thompson, is this up to date with the changes, the licensure, with the changes? Because, you know, they change with the season. So is this policy up to date as to the recent changes?
Yes, ma'am, I have reviewed it and it is updated.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we accept 7130.
Thank you. And thank you for the second. I do have a question. Ms. Melissa, define lifetime license holder for me, please.
Okay. So the state adopted a new policy that anyone who has 30 years of experience, any teacher, certified person with 30 years of experience may apply for the lifetime license, and it grants you like 30 years of experience, and you don't have to do anything to renew that license at that point.
I
For
did
the
not know
duration.
that. That's significant. Yes. Thank you.
You would qualify, Mr. Jenkins.
That's what I was just
You would
thinking.
qualify as well. Yeah.
That part did occur to me. I'm not saying I'm going for it. But
You have a
Okay.
star in your crown, okay?
Yeah. Once a teacher, always a teacher.
Sir?
Once a teacher, always a
Oh,
teacher.
yeah. We can't stop talking, can we?
You can't get it out of your blood. It won't go. Okay, if there's no further discussion, it's been moved and seconded that we accept policy 7130. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. That brings us to leave, policy 7510. And again, there is stricken language relating to COVID. Yes, sir.
Likewise, policy 7510 is in reference to removing COVID-19 pandemic procedures. No further discussion on 7510. I make a motion to accept recommendations.
Mr. Henry, Mr. Brewer, Mr. Chair, I just have one question, Miss Melissa. Miss Melissa, has it changed that they can continue to still get these 20 or 30 days? In other words, I've used all my days. I come to appeal, you give me some more. How many is it? 20 days? 20 days, I can get me 20 more days. I can get 20 more days. Has that limit finally stopped? Or we can still appeal for 20 more days, 20 more days? Where is that now?
My understanding is that you can still appeal for the 20 days, but only once, maybe the school year. Extended, yes, it's called extended sick leave.
So you can still appeal for days when you use that 20, you use your own days, then you would give them 20 hardship, then they can come back and get 20 more. Is that still going? I mean,
Only the one-time 20.
only one
Once-
time.
That's my understanding, Dr. Meany.
All right, thank you.
Also, our employees have the right to file for Family Medical Leave Act. And we have to grant that if they meet the requirements. So that could extend their leave on special, just like for emergency cases.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's another kind of leave that we've been blessed with.
I understand, but I'm saying you could
Yeah.
probably attached. If that person applied, we couldn't deny that.
Oh, no. Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Thank you.
The paid leave. So let's say I do get family medical leave, which is just a protection of your job. If I only have a few days, we'll pay you through those days, but after you've exhausted all of your days, it's without pay. So the FMLA protects your job, not necessarily pays you. And a lot of people don't understand that, but it's not necessarily with pay.
See, I didn't know that. I thought you got paid up when you got family medical leave.
Ms. Gentry, Ms. Melissa might have to help me with this because of, just some situations I've heard that, and then, it might come to us and then we end up calling you. So where we're at now, let me go to this example first. I've used all my leave. I don't have any. Is there a point I come down here that I can't get any? And that's one question, that I can't get any leave at all. Does that happen?
Yes, sir. Once
Okay.
you've exhausted all of your days, you cannot, but now you can request volunteer shared leave.
Okay.
So that's when we, if you have exhausted all of your days and you make that request, which goes through Miss Angela
Right.
McCormick,
Okay.
then we will
Agree with
put that up at the schools and a person can voluntarily give you days.
Now, when I've used all that I have, and then I can come ask for the family medical leave, I can get that. Is there a limited number of times that I can get that, or is it, I can keep asking?
If I make no mistake, family medical leave is once a school year.
Once a
It
year.
starts over each
Okay.
school year, and I think it protects you for 60 days.
Okay.
And like I said, you're not going to get paid for those days unless you actually have saved up accumulated
Right.
days like sick leave, annual leave.
What does, is there a term if someone has been sick, been out, they've exhausted days, and they're not at work, or they might come 1 or 2 days a week, and they get their check and it shows that 2 or 3 days. Now, is there any type of leave they're doing when they're doing that, or that's just the situation they're in?
It is possible that they have an intermittent doctor's note, medical note. That would be about the only time. But also keep in mind that if you've used all of your days, a lot of people will apply for short-term disability. And then after that exhausts, then you go into long-term disability. So that's how some people survive that medical condition once they've exhausted all of their days.
How long can that long-term disability last?
Once a person qualifies for long-term disability, they have to resign from their position with us. Short-term disability, they can continue, we keep them on. But once they actually qualify for long-term disability, they have to resign their position because that means they're no longer coming, they're not returning.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, can you qualify for voluntary shared leave? There is a medical requirement in order for an individual to qualify. It's not just for the accident.
Yes, and that comes to us a lot of times. It has to be a medical condition, and you have to have exhausted all of your days in order to be eligible to request that shared voluntary leave. Life-threatening, yes, sir.
But Ms. Melissa, 60 days is the due date, or that's the end of all leave, whether it's shared or voluntary or exhausted. I heard 60 days in there. Is that?
The 60 days is the Job Protection from Family Medical Leave Act.
Okay.
But of course, if there's a medical situation,
Can stand beyond.
right, I
Yeah.
mean,
Thank you. Any further questions, comments on policy 7510? I do not see, well, other than the paragraph that we just addressed on page 101, I do not see any other notations in red. Is there a motion to accept it as presented? All right, been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Brings us policy 2130, board member compensation and expenses. Notated in red, all I see are the resource websites on page 4.
I think this is pretty well laid out. I make a motion that we approve this section.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. It is approved. Online instruction. We've actually addressed this somewhat earlier.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question, and Bobby or somebody in curriculum could answer it. Now, is this up to date now? Dealing with or without COVID, is this going to be okay?
Yes, this is up to date.
I have one question. This was asked last summer of me. If we suspend a child, I know we can, when it gets back, he or she can make up the work. The mother wanted to know, can their child be put online? Is there any time that the child can be put online in a suspension?
Right, so Dr. Emmanuel, this is the prime opportunity for students to participate in Apex. They can pick up their assignments through that. And there's also, depending upon the suspension, there are times where students have participated remotely.
Thank you.
Let me just make one other question for my own personal clarification regarding remote learning. And I think it's already been addressed, but I want to be sure that under no circumstances can a student or parent arbitrarily request remote learning as opposed to conventional in classroom. Okay. Thank you.
My motion still stands.
Second.
We moved and seconded that we accept this policy as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Concussion and head injury. I thought this was very thorough and to the point, which it needs to be. The only notations in red are, again, websites, and some of them have been stricken. There's only one that is still showing without a line through it.
Mr. Chair, policy 4270 /6145, recommended changes is the resources and subscript and general statutes. I think in our athletic program, we identify the definition of concussions and therefore in the removal and return to play policy. So I make a recommendation that we accept policy 4270 /6145.
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded that we accept policy 4270 /6145.
Mr. Gentry, if I make one quick comment, section F on that policy, I'm gonna say whatever we have to do, make sure we keep these high school trainers in place. We've seen recently how important that can be. And so we make sure whatever in years coming that we keep those trainers there. And if anything, expand it. We don't need to lose that area.
I'm glad, Mr. Craig, that you mentioned that, and I'm going back several months now. Am I correct in that Public Schools Robeson County contracted with professional trainers from UNCP to be on site or to ensure that we have at least one qualified trainer at each high school athletic event? Am I correct in that?
We are working with UNCP, but I'm not sure if they're on site at games and events. What we have required is all coaches received CPR training. And so we're in the process of doing that. I think the UNCP program is helping us to train and doing internships at some of our schools is what's happening. and then we try to employ those trainers once they graduate.
Mr. Gentry and Dr. Williamson, if I'm wrong, and we do have the trainers that it's through Southeastern now, I believe. That trainer group is through Southeastern. When I say football games, when I'm saying home games, I know football, basketball, baseball, there's a trainer there now. Baseball, the home school we go to, there's usually a trainer on site. But our trainers are through Southeastern, and I'm not going to say it's all sports on the high school level, but there's quite a few of them that there is a trainer there. In many cases, I know in football they're at practice too, and some other ones. So I can honestly say I haven't been to a game this year that I didn't see our trainer or another school's trainer close by.
Yes, sir, Mr. Craig, just to reiterate what you're saying. Now the Gafford-Waller Concussion Act requires, like I said, we follow that guideline or that law. And like I said, they have to be there at all football practices, and that trumps everything. But yes, while at home games, every school that has a trainer, and they're there, they come in at like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and then they stay until the last practice is over or until the last home game is over. But the only time they have to go away is at football.
I think the DeMar Hamlin situation gave us some good focus on that. Okay. No further discussion. Do I hear a motion that we accept 4270, 6145?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Getting close to the end. Brings us to use of unmanned aircraft, 4334. 5035, 7345. Of course, this is still relatively new and it's becoming more and more popular, but with that, a whole host of compliance issues with FAA and other agencies, plus just general, I won't say just general, but especially general safety precautions.
Mr. Chair, if I may, at our curriculum meeting the other night, reference was made to this policy and our plans to implement a drones program. I think the question was, would we need to modify this policy as a result of the program? And the answer is no.
That being said, I make a motion to accept 4334, 5035, and 7345.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept those policies as stated. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Brings us to 6230, school meal and competitive food standards. Yes, sir.
Policy 6230 is pretty much standard school requirements and nutrition program. The suggested changes are legal references. No major discussion. I make a motion to accept 6230.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept 6230 as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Crowdfunding, I do remember having addressed this policy or one similar to it because I recognize the word crowdfunding. 7360, 8225.
And Mr. Chair, in other words, no one can be raising money using the public schools, Robeson County's image, blessings, or anything without express approval of the superintendent and to meet these guidelines. So I would like to make a motion that we approve this policy.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That brings us to policy 7241, drug and alcohol testing of commercial motor vehicle operators. There is some language in red. on page 2 of 4, and there are also some stricken language in red on that same page. Speaks to the record and references to those who are applying to operate in that capacity.
Mr. Chair, if I may, let me ask Dr. Guzman if he would speak to this just as information, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, sir. We have been dealing with this prior to the pandemic. This was a federal mandate that came to us right before we endured the pandemic. We're, of course, following this policy to the letter. We are already doing this with the federal motor carrier. It is a extensive background that goes through. We conduct a limited each year on our employees, as well as a pre-employment. And so this also, what this prevents is, since we're so close to a bordering state, prevents them from losing a CDL based on drug testing in one state and trying to hop the border and come to another state in order to gain a CDL. So this federal mandate helps to police that and prevent that from occurring.
Thank you.
Dr. Goodman, may I ask a question? What is our track record in that regard into findings that come about as a result of applicants? Are we batting 1,000 or somewhere below that, or?
In the 3 years in which we have conducted this, there have only been 2 cases.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Dr. Guzman, I got a question. Just came to me. If we have an accident with a bus, or well, our contractors would be in a different category, but our buses or state-driven vehicle assigned to the school system, are we requiring a drug test from those employees?
Yes, sir. We actually,
And alcohol?
yes, sir. When that instance happens, especially if somebody is transported via ambulance, they are taken immediately for a drug test at that time.
Same hold true for our bus drivers.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I make a motion, we accept policy 7241.
Been moved and seconded that we accept policy 7241 as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That brings us to the end of this particular series.
Ms. Gentry, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Because I didn't get it answered earlier. I want to know, Ms. Melissa, can I get a lifetime teaching license, but I'm not coming back to work? But can I get that license? Help me out.
We will have to look at the dates, Mr. Craig, because it goes through, I think it just come into effect maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay,
So you have to meet those guidelines.
okay. Please check on that for me.
Okay.
Informational purpose.
Mr. Chair, if
Yes,
no further discussion around policies for PSRC, I make a motion, we adjourn.
I've been moving and seconded. Mr. Bobby has it.
Well, Ms. Melissa.
I'm sorry.
I would just like to go on record by stating that we need to review policy 7430, substitute teachers. It's been brought to my attention that we do have some information within that policy that we no longer follow. For example, it states that the superintendent and principals prepare a list of individuals and the principal selects the substitute. We need to look at that and change it, update it to our new system that automatically calls the list of substitutes that are put in the system.
We can. So Ms. Thompson, are we on that Cole, can you pull this up for everybody? It's policy 7430. Ms. Thompson, is it that last line? And to Dr. Winston's point, for the board meeting, we're gonna do this as a whole, and do we want to pull class ranking just as a separate identifier, or do we want to include it as a policy as a whole? So when we get the agenda, again, so that we can, how we need to present this.
The policy as a whole, because we made the recommendation, it's been approved, so it's part of this total package. And then we're going to communicate that out to the buildings, so as a whole.
Go back to, if you have a satisfactory answer. I believe I heard a motion to adjourn. Okay. Yes, sir.
Before we adjourn, I think it would be valuable that if we gave Miss Jessica the opportunity at our board meeting to make, just for awareness, to make everybody responsible to go back and review that particular policy, because there was a lot of content that was changed there.
Ms. Jessica, you have a handle. You have a handle on all this. I've known her a long time. She's a fine individual.
We all agree?
Yes. All right. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion about adjournment? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you all.